how big is the water crisis in India?
India's cities are struggling for water. Can India solve its water crisis? And what can we do about it? That's what we discuss in this episode with three innovators who are solving this big problem, water.
India is the world's largest user of groundwater.
Something as important as water, we never use tech. We still use prehistoric ways of managing water.
What, according to you, is the future of water in India?
Just like how we do financial accounting, like that, I think the environmental accounting, water accounting will eventually happen.
We did a pilot in Japan. Next month, we are deploying a unit in Abu Dhabi.
Treated wastewater or reused water will be the new gold. All cities can be net positive. Depending on the choice we make, our future will be bright or bleak.
That is very optimistic. Welcome to the Better India Show. This is a show where we speak with people who are attempting to solve some of India's largest problems. And in this episode, we're focusing on water. Very, very recently, a few weeks ago, you've been seeing all the newspapers talking about Bangalore's water crisis. And increasingly, the feeling is that this is only going to worsen year after year. We're starting to see taps run dry, wells run dry. We've seen a lot of lakes kind of vanish. So the whole objective of this conversation is to get your inputs, your insights, and what hope do we have as a country in terms of addressing this whole challenge around water. And of course, each of you is working in a very, very unique, innovative way to kind of address this challenge. So before we get into the details of what the crisis is looking like, what are the solutions, I would love for us to get started with a brief introduction from each of us to talk about what you've studied and what you're kind of working towards, and what specifically in water are you kind of doing today. So that would be really great. So we could start with Swapnil.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. First of all, thank you, Hemant, for having me here, and great to be with Ganesh and Vishu sir also. So I lead an organization called Uravu Labs. I'm co-founder and CEO there. And what we do is we tap atmospheric moisture using renewable energy to create high quality water. This whole idea started way back when I was studying at NIT Calicut. I have an undergrad in architecture and urban design, and I was also working on my thesis on wastewater treatment. So our college campus actually ran out of water, and this led us to thinking, okay, what can we do further? And I'm a big science fiction fan, Star Wars fan. So this was also one of the inspirations for us to start working in this direction. And today we have almost 60-member team. Have set up a 4,000 liter per day kind of capacity in Bangalore, and working towards further actually reducing groundwater consumption by using an alternative sustainable source.
Wow. Okay. Great. That's like literally creating water from thin air.
Yes.
Yeah, Vishwanath, you want to just...
Yeah, well, I'm a civil engineer and an urban and regional planner by qualification. I had a small NGO called Biome Trust, and we're focused on sustainable water management, which includes rainwater harvesting, groundwater management, wastewater reuse, and stuff like that. But over time, I've also been working with the government here in Karnataka as part of their technical committee to try and understand the projects that are formulated for the city and how they could be improved or made good to run. Also been teaching at the Same Premji University, a course called Water for students who are interested from development and public policy. And used to write for the Hindu, a weekly column called Water for about 12 years, focusing on sustainable water. I feel like a Methuselah here because I've been in the water sector for 38 years now.
38 years. And you have this incredible nickname called Zen Rain Man. I'm curious to know, how did that name come along?
So that's because one needed an email handle, and there are a million Vishwanaths in this world, I figured out. So when I was trying to register the handle, Zen is a sort of philosophy that I'm particularly interested in. And Rain Man is from the Dustin Hoffman movie, which was one of its kind. And so one put together those two. So that moniker has stuck in this social media world because Twitter, Facebook, Instagram need handles. And Zen Rain Man is as good a handle as you can get.
Absolutely. And Rain Man is one of my favorite films as well. I think it's one of the best works of Dustin Hoffman.
Absolutely, yeah.
Lovely. Great. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
My pleasure.
Ganesh, your organization promises small businesses and facilities
Mm.
to become water positive? Would love to know your journey and what you're working on.
Yeah, if you ask me about my journey, I grew up in the city, Bangalore. My father says there are more than 1,000 lakes in the city before I was born. Today we have a fraction of it. And the earliest childhood, we had a well at home. By the time I started going to school, the well kind of dried out. And then, fortunately, we got tap connection at home. And then, of course, I went to National College to do my this one. By that time, we had to construct over a tank, and some by the time I went to RV College because water was not able to fill the overhead tank. And later, when I went to do my master's at the University of Science, we had to put one more overhead tank. And today we get water from tanker. So that's my journey in seeing how water availability. Yeah, I feel like while somebody like my family has such crazy crisis for water, imagine industries have to scrape in their share of water from all of us, right? And they're in a massive and imminent water risk. So we help industries and large commercial facilities to reduce their water consumption and eventually become water positive by using digital means. So our thesis is, just like how water as a liquid is transparent and clear, what if you make the data of water transparent and clear and build solution on top of it? Can you solve water crisis or a share of water crisis? That's what we've been trying to do today.
Great. No. So I want to double click on each of the initiatives and we will go in detail. But before we get there, what I really want to do is kind of do a lay of the land or lay of the water to speak. How big is the water crisis in India? What is India staring at? What would you say?
Well, here's the thing. We get about 4,000 billion cubic meters of water annually through rainfall. Most of it comes during the southwest monsoons, June 1st to September 30th. 75% to 80% of the total endowment comes. India's biggest challenge is to hold on to this 4 months of water for the rest of the 8 months. And how do you hold on to water? Well, you hold on to them in the old growth forests, catchments. You hold on to them in the glaciers. You hold on to it in soil. You hold on to it in ponds, lakes, rivers, and streams. And most importantly, you hold on to it in aquifers. And then you use it based on that year's endowment. Some years you get less rainfall, some years you get more rainfall, so you manage the endowment and then you manage the waters. But what we got stuck in is a huge use of agricultural water. So right now, agriculture uses 90% of India's total water, of which 4 crops, wheat, rice, sugarcane, and cotton, uses 75% of that agricultural water. And the unfortunate part is through certain policies, we've encouraged these food crops to be grown in areas where there's not enough water. So it's groundwater fed, for example. If we fix these 4 crops and make sure that the farmers who grow it, their livelihoods are protected, we have enough and more water. There's no scarcity of water. So there's a scarcity of management, there's not a scarcity of resource. And I think we're now clearly understanding that, and we're moving in the direction of managing this agricultural water. If we do so well, we will have enough and more for our urbanization for all of India's needs.
That's an interesting statistic. I mean, I wasn't aware that 90% of all the available water kind of goes towards agriculture.
Yes, the consumable water goes towards
yeah.
agriculture.
Is consumable water the same as fresh water, which people call it as fresh
of the
water?
4,000 billion cubic meters that falls, a lot of it is not available to us. It becomes what's called green water. It falls in areas where it's evapotranspired, so it's not humanly possible to use it for purposes such as agriculture or industrial or domestic. So of that, agriculture uses roughly 90% of the total water.
And in terms of the how we're seeing our cities kind of capture that water, while I understand the agriculture part, but in terms of what the cities are kind of they receive a lot of rainfall, like Bangalore receives a lot of rainfall. How well are we managing that water?
So there's a paradigm shift that's needed in understanding local waters. What happened in the 20th and in the 19th centuries especially was this dependence on local water meant we were vulnerable to climate risks. If there was continuous drought, as in the case in Bangalore in 1876, 1877, 1878, even a population like 1.8 lakhs could not be supported by the glorious 1,000 lakes which existed in our city. 90,000 people died in the city. 12.5 lakh people died in the old Mysore kingdom. 1/4 of the population. Drought and famine was the end result of 3 years of bad rainfall. So local water was not something that the then governments thought was reliable enough. So therefore, large dams were built. Bangalore itself built a huge reservoir called Hesarghatta, 1896. It used steam engine to bring water to the city. So we moved away from local waters to rivers as our source of water and forgot about local waters. That helped us till the 20th century. But now it's the era of more management of water rather than supply of water. So we created something called the Bangalore Water Supply Board. We need to convert that to a Bangalore Water Management Board. And when you manage water, then you look at all local resources: rainwater, lake water, pond water, streams, rivers, groundwater, treated wastewater, piped water, all of it together. So every era determines our paradigm or the way we look at water. This is the era of water as an environmental good, as a social good, and then as a physical good.
So is it fair to say that it's not really then a supply issue of water? Our rivers still have fresh water. Our rains are still giving us enough water.
Yeah,
It's
we
just that we're not
can.
managing it.
Sure, I think it's a governance issue. It's not a resource issue. It's not a water issue. If we don't have the right institutions, we don't have the right governance structure, and we don't have the right finances invested in the right places. If we do all those three, the governance, the institutions, and the finance, there is no problem at all for water.
And so then what's the barrier? Is it the lack of governance? Is it the lack of
Till the 20th century,
understanding?
we created institutions which were of a particular kind. And these were, let's say, for example, our water supply boards or our Kaveri, Niravari Nigam, as they call it, irrigation boards, which were meant to just distribute water, right? Not to deal with it and protect our river basins. We haven't created river basin institutions. So we just allocate waters of the rivers. The Kaveri is a classic example where you take for granted that water comes to the river, then you divvy it up between the four states competing for it. We haven't worked out a framework as to how the Kaveri should continue to flow the way it flows, with volumes of water as well as quality of water. So we destroy the Western Ghats and think that the Kaveri will flow forever. So unless we create those right institutions now at a river basin scale, a river basin institution, and at a city scale, an integrated urban water management institution, we will continue to face these problems. It's a governance challenge.
Understood. And I was reading this whole statistic about the groundwater table kind of fluctuating, like, and what you were saying, your wells ran dry and so on. And I think it's an acute phenomenon in urban India more so because of the whole concretization of this thing, the lakes that vanished in Bangalore. Could you help us understand a little on what is groundwater and how does it get replenished?
Right. So you can imagine a sponge below our feet. It's a very hard sponge. It's not a very soft sponge. So when it rains, water infiltrates through the top layer, which is the soil, which is not hard. It's not paved right now. It gets into the sponge. Then we put a straw into the sponge and draw the water and take it whenever we want it. Below the sponge are rocks. And in between those rocks are cracks and crevices where there's still more water. That's the deeper aquifer. We can tap into that too with our straw. But we have to make sure that the water that percolates into the sponge is more than what we draw out from the sponge. What we've done so far is to draw more water out than what goes in. India is the world's largest user of groundwater, 250 cubic kilometers of it annually. More than China and USA combined, which are number 2 and number 3. We have 33 million to 40 million bore wells and boreholes and wells. By far the largest, the most fragmented use of that groundwater too. And we don't have the right institutional framework for groundwater management. Just to give you an example, the Bangalore Water Supply and Sewerage Board does not have a single hydrogeologist. So groundwater doesn't exist in the overall formal planning framework of managing water. It's Wild West terrain. And so it's undergoverned. If we don't get the institutional and legal frameworks to manage it, we'll find it very tough to be sustainable with water.
And yeah, I was also reading about what's happening in like the Gangetic plains and
Yes.
the thing where apparently the groundwater was extremely high, and now that tables have really dropped. How how can how can like from a government perspective, while you also have a need to get so much water because you have such a huge population and is it that we need to figure out different sources of water for various consumptions and let groundwater be, or like how do you address the challenge of this ever growing population and their requirements, and then they're having this sort of limited resource in groundwater?
So there's a historical accident to it. In the 60s, in the mid 60s, we ran out of food. We had to get food grains from the USA. PL 480 was the arrangement, and it was literally ship to mouth. living for us. Again, 3 years of drought. And so, therefore, we unleashed what's called the green revolution. We brought in high yielding varieties of seeds. Those high yielding varieties of seeds demanded a lot of fertilizers to express themselves fully. In turn, they demanded pesticides, weedicides, insecticides, and herbicides. They also demanded groundwater. We didn't realize that. But then the groundwater revolution was unleashed at that particular point of time in the 60s. So we got food security. We now have surplus food grains in our go down. Many a time they rot. There's excess production of sugarcane, and yet the farmers are in distress because there's so much excess production that farmers prices, they don't get the right prices for goods. So we got to fix the prices right so that farmers livelihoods and income are protected, raised, and we make sure that they get enough, but that we don't overproduce, that we don't convert our water to food which then is wasted or doesn't give remunerative income to those who grow it, right? So that's the challenge. And so therefore the challenge for water is you can't write a water policy without writing an agricultural policy, an energy policy, and a forest policy together. But unfortunately, we write all these four policies independent of each other. At some point of time, we'll have to integrate that and write our policies together so that we manage it well. This is wickedly complex problems, but we know what the problem is. It's now for us to figure out how the solutions will emerge.
Vishwanath, you mentioned this whole thing that the amount of groundwater that India uses is many multiples more than what US and China combined kind of do it. What is it that they did then to address their water requirements and not tap into groundwater the way we did? What's the difference? What did they do? And is there like any learning that we could import from there?
Unfortunately, not. It's what India's hydrogeology and social structure and food growing structure is completely different from that of the USA and China. Just to give you a figure, both USA and China are roughly 3 times larger than India in terms of geographical area. We have 3.3 million square kilometers, 9.9 is the number that they both have. But in terms of arable or cultivable land, we are right there with the USA and China. So with 1/3 the total land, we still have that much of cultivable land. And therefore, when you mention the Gangetic Basin, over centuries, it's been the most fertile and fecund plains on the globe. That's a place where water and soil is so excellent that it can support any kind of population. No wonder we are the world's largest population, right? So therefore, with that population, with our 7, 8, 9% economic growth, and with the water restraints that we have, and the understanding that groundwater is critical to us, we have to develop our own solutions to manage groundwater sustainably.
Understood. So, Swapnil, I want to just come to you, right? Like I mentioned earlier, your organization is literally, you're kind of conjuring up water from air,
Yes.
which is very interesting. Could you help us understand a little on and simplify a little bit of
Sure.
this? How does this technology work? How are you making water from air?
Sure. Just before that, I want to take a step back. Like how Vishu sir was telling more about groundwater depletion, and so usually what happens is technology and infrastructure also pave a way for how the consumption patterns of industries, agriculture, and things how they get established over time. So, for example, when bore wells came in 1960s, you got the green revolution and a lot of water consumption from, especially from groundwater. Specifically, Romans introduced the aqueducts, which were used to then transport water from, say, rivers from further distances to our cities, towns, right? So I think a lot of the technology shifts and infrastructure shifts also enable how water gets consumed over time and how it's getting utilized. So similarly, like what how we also started was to look at a problem from a infrastructure city scale, where we realize a lot of places, especially in outskirts of cities or even remote rural areas, won't have water infrastructure in the piped, usually which we have in a piped infrastructure format, and they will then definitely tap into groundwater because it's the most easily accessible. You dig a bore well and you start drawing water. But the problem what happened used to happen now is, especially because groundwater consumption is so high, and groundwater essentially is a non-renewable source, because studies show that it takes almost 1400 years for groundwater to replenish naturally, and only 6% of world's groundwater is actually renewable in nature, because it's taking less than 50 years to replenish. So that is the big problem, where while we are tapping into groundwater and it remains like one of the most usable source, it's non-renewable, and then especially you don't have an infrastructure in place to supply a lot of these outer areas or even remote rural areas. So that was the whole idea where, or the problem we were trying to look at, and that's why air as a source comes as a potential option. One reason being there's already a huge atmospheric river, we can say it's present in our atmosphere. So at any given point, air has 6 times the more water than all the world's rivers combined.
Wow,
So
that's
it's a huge
so there's a
amount of
lot of
there's a
water
lot
then
of
in the
water.
atmosphere.
Yes. So even if you take say Bangalore for an example, 700 square kilometers, and I take about 100 meters of air column, there's almost 2 billion liters of water in the air at any given point. And Bangalore's water consumption is roughly around 1.5 billion liters daily. So there's already a huge amount of water, and this might vary according to
Sure.
locations, but Bangalore is not even like a coastal area. Go to Chennai, it'll be a lot more. uh, so things like that. So that's where we thought, one is there's huge quantum of water. Second is all this water vapor in the air replenishes in just 8 to 10 days. So while there's a source like groundwater which is taking 1400 years to replenish, or you have rainwater which is just 3 to 4 months of the year, and because of climate change now it's more sporadic, it's more intense. So you don't even know how to plan for such thing. But air gets replenished, water vapor in air gets replenished in just 8 to 10 days naturally, because you have evaporation constantly happening from surface bodies, evapotranspiration happening from plants, and biodiversity, and even water evaporating from land. So these two together factors, pushed us to explore this further. And while there are, the solutions already built in, technology adoption in water also takes a lot of time. The one technology like reverse osmosis, which we use, on a very frequent basis for purifying water, was developed in 1950s, and here we are today, almost 70 years later. Still, reverse osmosis penetration in Indian households is hardly 10 to 12%. So, I think that's also tries to technology plays a key role in how shifts are also happening in our application adoption. So for us, we started with that idea that how can you make water on site or more locally, because now you don't have to depend on transporting water, or you don't have to depend on different rainfall patterns, while you can collect same amount of water over a more reliable time period consistently. So we started working on that. Initially we we used very basic technology which is very similar to an air conditioner, where you condense the water and you'll see some water droplets. But within 6 months we realized that's not going to work out. It's very power consumption is very high, cost will be always high. So while you have all this potential to use air as a resource, how do you make it more affordable and scalable? So we started using something called as desiccant materials. Desiccant materials are kind of materials which readily absorb moisture from there.
Give me an example of a
So
desiccant
one
material.
common example is silica gel.
Right.
When you buy a pair of footwear or electronics, you'll see a small pouch. So usually what happens is in and around the silica gel pouch, it will absorb the moisture and create a drier environment, right? So we use something called like desiccant materials, and there are a variety of them. We use a liquid salt solution of calcium chloride. Calcium chloride is again second most abundant salt on earth, very readily available, byproduct of many industrial processes also. So we use that as a salt solution. We absorb the moisture, and then we apply heat energy at about 60 degrees Celsius to then release the water and collect it as ultra pure, almost distilled water. Now this good part is because it's a heat driven technology, there are a variety of heat energy sources
Hmm.
which can potentially power it at a lower cost. So solar heat is one of them. Then you have waste heat from industries. So a lot of manufacturing, your power plants, your cement, your steel, a lot of manufacturing industry, distilleries have a lot of waste heat. Data centers. So the idea was that can you tap into some of these renewable energy sources, which are also actually declining in cost, and then can you pair it with our solution to so as to reach both affordability and deliver it at industrial scale. So we have been working towards that. Last 1.5 years, we have scaled it to 4,000 liters per day today.
So you make 4,000 liters of water
Yes,
per day from air.
yes.
Okay.
As of today, but the idea is to get to 1 lakh liter per day kind of industrial units, where you
But
can.
considering that there is thermal energy required and kind of do this, how how much more expensive is this water
Sure,
on a per liter basis
sure,
compared to, let's say, the water I get and what I
sure,
pay for?
sure. So the thing is like because there's a phase change happening, you have
Yeah.
moisture in the air, and then you're changing phase, and water has one of the highest latent heat.
Right.
So definitely, the energy consumption is much higher, and you have higher cost of water. So today we are somewhere around 3 rupees per liter. But the roadmap is to get to like sub 1 rupee per liter.
Right.
And that can happen with scale and both technology developments, where we are also looking at reducing our energy load, especially by reusing some of the energy which is given in the first step, and also some membranes which can selectively remove water from the calcium chloride solution. So it will come at par at to that 60 to 80 paise per liter kind of cost for ultra pure water. Now the applications might not be directly for say agriculture or
Sure.
for your bathing water, because you don't need ultra pure water there, but then you have pharmaceuticals, you have cosmetics, you have distilleries, you have so many other applications where you can use this ultra pure high quality water. And I think problem of water scarcity or water stress is also quite linked to water quality also deteriorating in many places, because the further you dig deeper for groundwater, lot of different minerals, especially heavy metals like arsenic fluoride, also start seeping in. So that also like is a problem. We have PFAS, forever chemicals from coatings like Teflon, so many plastics which are now there ubiquitously, a lot of water sources, even detected in rainfall. So like now reverse osmosis kind of solutions can't remove PFAS, so you have to need another set of membranes and chemicals to further remove that. So if you start with a solution which is almost giving ultra pure water and then giving it on site, and if you can crack the sub 1 rupee per liter kind of mark, then it opens a lot of applications. While today it's at a higher cost, so that's why we are starting more at the premium end and going from there.
So anybody can just take this unit from Uravu,
Yes.
install it next to their facility,
Yes.
and have water coming in, like pure
Yes.
water coming in.
So yes, that's the idea, but today it's at more
Sure.
scale where we are still doing it in house.
Sure.
But we have started deploying it outside. We did a pilot in Japan. Next month we are deploying a unit in Abu Dhabi, and they are going to use it for hydroponics.
Right.
So they're building a lot of these indoor vertical farms where they need high quality water, and that area suffers from physical water scarcity. So they need alternative sources of water.
Understood. You made an interesting statement, and I wasn't aware of this, that groundwater is not renewable. Intuitively, it feels like when rains fall, they're going into the soil, and then eventually that water is going down somewhere, which will eventually be kind of picked up. So why do we call it not
The
renewable?
non-renewability part is because of the time. So groundwater has been collecting over since Earth has been forming, right? So millions of years, but the rate we are extracting it, and then naturally it's not replenishing that fast. So most of the estimates show that on natural scale it takes 1400 years to replenish naturally.
For the same volume of water to get
Yes.
replenished.
Yes.
Okay. It's not so much about the quality of the water.
No.
Got it. Which is interesting, because if we are saying that rainwater kind of replenishes it all, so how do we address the fact that if we have, does this mean, like, again I'm just coming back, like my understanding on this is, does this mean that if we've used up all the groundwater, does that mean that we cannot get it back to the same levels?
It depends on the kind of geology that exists, right? So, for example, in the hard rock terrain, which is 2/3 of India, the holding capacity of the rocks for groundwater is limited. It's, let's say, 4x the rainfall.
Sure.
But it can be renewed almost annually, especially the shallow aquifer. The deeper aquifers take time, and we've got to figure out where the recharge zones are and how do you percolate it down. Just to give you a number of the total rainfall that falls on a rock formation like Bangalore, only 3 to 5% of it actually infiltrates down below 1 meter of the total rainfall. So we have to do enhanced recharge through methods of collecting it in lakes and ponds, and then through direct infiltration. But it's the other way around in the Indo-Gangetic plain. In most of the Indo-Gangetic plain, it could be that once you draw groundwater out, the soil itself settles and becomes solidified and is no longer capable of holding water. Not everywhere, but in certain pockets. Though they can hold massive volumes of water, but once drawn out at unreplenishable rates, difficult to refill it again.
Got it. Yeah. And so I think then your solution can really help where, let's say, piped water can't reach easily. Groundwater tables are not there. And I can suddenly just start a unit which is, let's say, water intensive, but without affecting any of the other ecology around it. Great. No, thanks for sharing that. And I wanna quickly bring in Ganesh here. Ganesh, Fluxgen is the name of the company, and what you're doing is very interesting, where you're using AI and IoT to actually let facilities, small businesses, factories, establishments get to understand water. How are they using water? Where are they using water? And then your solutions help them go what you call water positive. Could you help us understand what have you built and what is this technology and how does it work?
Yeah, before I talk about that, I would also like to say that if we all were consuming water very responsibly, I think my work I would have been completely redundant, right? I mean, in the fact that if we had people like Vishwanath sir, been all his principles on water management, everything has been followed. I would say in an alternate years, a company like Fluxgen shouldn't have existed.
Same, Ganesh.
So the point is that water as a subject is comes under this tragedy of commons. We use it at a very abundant. We think that it is infinitely available. I mean, we just discussed today, right? How groundwater is not infinitely available and it takes many years to actually fill in. Thinking that it's going to be there forever, and we have actually used it without that knowledge that it is era of abundance is over, right? In this scenario, obviously, as Vishwanath has said, agriculture actually consumes huge amount of water. In fact, all my work initially started with agriculture. Unfortunately, nobody was buyer of any of our work, and it just became a paper that we presented at Berkeley, and now it's in Springer, that work on agriculture water management. So it so happened that we have to start somewhere, right? About how do we manage water better, right? And
Can anyone read that paper? Is it
yeah,
put
it's
up somewhere
available
on?
in Springer.
Great. So we'll
Yeah, I
we'll
can
put the
share the
link to
link. You
our.
can.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So then we wanted to solve this problem. It's like very clear that the water scarcity is going to hit, and the challenges on water is going to affect all of us, right? So then we started who buys the water at the highest price. The economics has to work out. Who faces the largest restriction on improper utilization of water? Who contaminates the water the most? Then we realized that industries actually are the large guzzlers, especially industries which are inherently water intensive, right? Food processing, beverage, and various other. So we decided to focus on these industries, right? And we decided to say how can we help these industries become water positive, in the sense, can they actually operate such that they consume least amount of water, and can these utilize the rainwater to the fullest extent and make sure the wastewater is utilized in such a way that they can augment fresh water needs to some level. So to do this, you need to, if you don't measure, you can't manage. So we decided, why don't we actually track water for these industries which consume huge amount of water. So we digitized the water infrastructure. We were able to initially just see where the water consumption happening and break down on it, and eventually when we started doing number crunching analytics on it, we were able to identify where there is leakage, wastage, excessive usage. Recently, the Tata Steel mining MD said they were consuming around 1 cubic meters of water in their mines, and after deploying our solution, they were able to reduce by half.
Wow.
And in their plant, they were able to reduce their water consumption by 26%. Right. So that means this water was unnecessarily utilized, and this water was unnecessarily contaminated, and so much of energy is utilized in when this water being utilized in the facility, right? And so essentially we are trying to we've used data science, IoT, or all this tech. Even this podcast is possible because of tech, right? But something as important as water, we never use tech, and we still use prehistoric ways of managing water, while the availability of water has not remained the same. So for us, once we do digitization, we were able to come up with a ways to strategize on reduction in water and see if the rainwater harvesting, like works done by Vishwanath sir and others, they would actually have implement great rainwater harvesting system, but unfortunately they don't manage it well, right? Various industries. So can you continuously track if the rainwater harvesting is working fine? Is the sump that is filling all the rainwater, is it actually optimally working, right? And even the wastewater treatment, there are great people, Anant Kodavasal and others, who are doing great work in wastewater treatment, right? But can you actually say whether these wastewater treatment is working as it should be working for like say 5 years, 6 years. So that way we are able to track the performance of it. If there's any possibility of a downtime, where do you shift that water? So ensuring that there's no downtime on this wastewater treatment and ensure the water that is coming from this wastewater treatment can actually augment your fresh water needs. So that way we are in a way trying to build an operating system for water, starting with industries. Maybe someday we still harbor the ambition of managing water for agriculture, but as of today our focus is to help the large consumers of water, industries, to reduce their consumption, make sure that rainwater harvesting is working in the most appropriate way, and the wastewater treatment actually is able to supply the augment the freshwater needs, so that eventually when you do all these three things along with few other things, they can become water positive.
Right. And so in like, like we keep reading reports about, there's a beverage company, they're taking 10x the water of the final product that comes in, or denims and the clothing that kind of consuming so much water. Now, I curious to know, because you're catering to these industries, what has been the reaction? Is that, like, my question is there enough intent, and are the incentives aligned for these businesses to take a call on this, or because they don't really see it, unless they measure it with your solution, they don't see it, they don't even see it as a big problem? How do you solve for that, and do you see the intent being strong?
So there are three pieces to why they have suddenly gotten woken up about it, right? One is the cost of water has increased, because you and I get water bill of 7 rupees per kiloliter in Bangalore, right? And industries buy at a much higher price. So there's a cost of water which has increased significantly for industries, and the tanker water is even more expensive today. And there's an indirect cost of water, which is pumping, purifying, chilling, boiling, recycling. All this consume a lot of energy. McKinsey says the true cost of water for say paper and pulp is 100 times the nominal cost of water. So there's a cost associated to water which is only increasing. If there's wasting some amount of water, the energy associated cost also gets wasted, right? Then there is business continuity risk. I've been told some of those large corporates dairy business shut down for 18 days. During this time, their competitors acquired all their customers, and it was a permanent shift. So business continuity risk works differently than a bottom line risk, right? And then there is India's GDP is going to get affected by up to 6% according to Niti Aayog report. So government has actually made there have always been great water laws or regulation. Now the enforcement has become strong. So all groundwater extraction today you have to track it, and you have to pay for it. And in water stress area, it is 10 times that cost. And not only that, if you have to reduce the consumption by 20% in 2 to 3 years. Not doing that, heavy penalty and repetition. Over and beyond listed companies like the Security and Exchange Board listed companies, they have to report their water consumption. For every rupee of revenue they make, they have to report how much water was required to make that rupee of revenue. So what it means is two companies which are probably making the same revenues, their water disclosure are very different, then they will lead to a lot of reputational risk, right? It's just not about this one, and this affects their market cap and other thing, reputation at large, right? So industries are actually, that's why I have woken up, and that's why they are looking at how to become water stewards. Not just that they want to be water positive, they are not looking at things outside the fence as well. They want to make sure they are able to make sure the water availability in the communities. Like, just think of it. You're running a large beverage company, just you mentioned, right? And there's no water in the communities. Most of the people come from the communities around that beverage factory. If there is no water, if there's a violence in that place, or there is some kind of a illness because of some contaminated water, they won't show up to their workplace, and it affects industry at large. So ESG risks are very real. I mean, it has material risk for them if they actually don't solve the problem of water. So that's why industries are now looking beyond their fence in making sure that they're doing. That's why I think work of Vishwanath sir and others thing are so important. Industries are actually looking at how do you ensure there is water positivity across. And when it comes to our work, you might do a lot of things, but if you don't analyze, or if you don't measure, analyze, and you don't have control over it, right? And you end up actually doing things, but you don't see what has led to what. That's why digitization helps in ensuring there whatever action they're taking in water positivity is actually corresponding to that outcome is also coming. And I think it is just not just within the fence, it's both within the fence and outside the fence.
And that's that for me at least. It's wonderful to know that there are incentives aligned, because I think at the end of the day, for a lot of businesses, economic incentive is what will get you to really come forward and make that change. How easy would it be to adapt this solution to the agri sector, considering that that's where the 90% of the water consumption is happening?
See, the thing is, if you just add up all the clothes that we have in our home and everything, it probably would be equivalent to amount of water required to make clothes of all of us right here, will be equivalent to Olympic size swimming pool. That's the amount of water that is required to have the clothes between only four of us. I'm
Wow.
talking about,
Wow.
right? So there is inherently water consumed at different levels. It's just not at industry water is consumed; it is consumed at all the agriculture land. So when you are talking about water disclosure by all the security exchange board listed, thousand security and exchange board listed companies, what it essentially means is that you are going to not track water only at where you are producing. You are going to track where the value chain is. I mean, eventually agriculture is part of the value chain of even this denim or whatever that we are consuming, right? So that way, that level of water accounting should come, like just like how we do financial accounting, like that. I think the environmental accounting, water accounting will eventually happen. For if you consider food and beverage industry, there should be like farm to fork level of water accounting. When that level of accounting comes, I think, I'm sure there is going to be water reduction at all levels. It's just, I think, only 30% of water. Please correct me if I'm wrong. Only 30% of water in agriculture is used for food, right? Remaining goes for many other things, right? So, in a way, we would see that how a lot of economics that work in commercial and enterprise business, they would actually be able to drive the unit economics of water even up to the agriculture level when this level of accounting comes into picture. Obviously, I would want to bear this whatever I'm wearing to be lesser than any of you guys. I would have that kind of incentive to buy. I mean, I would see it's already happening in Europe,
Right.
right? People
Yeah.
say this shirt has 70% less water consumed to this same shirt, which looks
Yeah.
like alike, right?
Yeah.
So, and eventually people, I mean, the Gen Zs of the world, they are so conscious because they go to all the schools where they learn environmental science and things at a very early age. They would actually demand for such level of consumption where there is a significant environmental footprint, not just only water. I would say significant reduction in environment footprint, and I think that would eventually drive the environmental economics as well, not just water economics.
Right. In fact, I still distinctly remember. I think a couple of years ago there was a denim brand in India which advertised a new range of jeans which consume 1/10 of the water that normal jeans consume,
Yeah,
and that was a good thing to see, that
yeah.
now this becomes a USP of selling.
Yeah, I mean, you just buy something, it will not just have price tag in the future because of
Yeah.
this new regulation. It will have the water footprint, carbon footprint when you buy it. So your buying choices, why, and it will be made mandatory that along with the price, just below that you should put the environmental footprint. So obviously, people don't. I mean, when you're having same brands in the same shop, and you see there is a, you don't want to buy something that consumes so much of water, right? So, and that's the reason why this denim company wants to actually be ahead of the game by saying that they consume 1/10 the water compared to others. So you will start seeing everything that we consume would have that environmental footprint.
Got it. I'm just curious to know how, when you talk about we measure water for, let's say, an industry. What's the kind of how do you hook this up, and what are the kind of dashboard metrics and stuff that I get to see if I run a factory and I want to implement your solution? How does it work? Where do you start from?
So we start with three questions. First is, do you actually know where exactly the water is getting wasted? Are you able to utilize most of the rainwater? Are you able to augment your freshwater needs through wastewater treatment? If the answer is no, then we know they're not using any of this solution. So we essentially track water from the source. Where are the water coming from? And where the water is being consumed, and is the in terms of water flow meter, you take water from the say groundwater, how much water is coming from groundwater utilities, and if the rainwater is also coming there, we would measure that. and then we would track water at all the key locations. There is, according to National Water Mission, you have to, or rather the Water Act of India, you have to track water at key location anyway. So we would track water at all the key location in the facility where the water consumption is happening. We would track the water stored in various places, whether some or over a tank, using level sensors and various other. And we would track the water going to the sewage treatment plant or effluent treatment plant, whether input and output. And we will also track the water quality of the sewage treatment plant or effluent treatment plant according to the pollution control board. You have to track TDS, pH, COD, BOD. We track all these things, and all this data would go to the dashboard, and we would be able to identify inefficiencies in the water network, both from the consumption of water, whether the harvesting of rainwater, or whether water treatment point of view, and we'd give up this prescriptive alerts what to do when this kind of notification comes. So our solution works on both mobile, Android, and iOS, and as well as a web application. So wherever they are, this in general, the maintenance staff have to work round the clock, so they can even sit at home and see how the facility is managed, right? So, and at the same time, we are able to generate all these reports on our dashboard. So basically, if somebody is actually a large consumer of water, they should be able to do their entire water balance chart and able to see, just like how you have financial accounting, you have water balance accounting to ensure every drop of water is accounted through this kind of a wireless sensor based
Right.
cloud system.
Amazing. We've spoken about the whole industry part over here that you're trying to address, and Vishwanath, you have been a very very big proponent and an active sort of player in this whole public and community participation. I keep seeing all your Twitter threads. Recharge the well. This is ready. The villages are coming together, and so on. How much of a interest are you seeing from the community in wanting to come together and solve for their own water needs?
That's a difficult question. See, the thing with water is that there are three ways of looking at it. One, is it a state resource? Two, is it a private resource? Or is it a common pool resource? Now, when we understand water, it's globally the thinking is that it should be treated as a common pool resource, with the state in trust, holding the common pool resource in trust. And what the common pool resource argument goes is just taking off from the tragedy of the commons to convert it in Dr. Elinor Rodstrom's views. How do you manage the commons as a common pool resource? That's the challenge. And therefore, it requires Samaj, Sarkar, and Bazaar, all three to come together. The Bazaar component of it, my friends here are already talking about it. The Sarkar component of it, we need to work with the institutions to hold them accountable, but also empower them to be able to deliver water. Just to give you an example, if in Bangalore there were universal connections to the piped water supply, and if there was 24/7 piped water supply, and if there was 135 liters of BIS 10500 drinking water, you wouldn't need bore wells, you wouldn't need tankers, you wouldn't need RO systems, you wouldn't need anything. All these products occur because of state failure to supply water. And that water is a human right, which we should be getting. So eventually, we'll have to work towards strengthening the state institutions to be delivering universal water to citizens in the city and in the rural areas to farmers. If that is delivered, we don't have a problem. And the state is a very good unit of cost efficiency. If they do so at bulk, then it's absolutely possible to do it. There's a final thing about water. If you pay the true ecological price for water, in the sense, when water is released back to nature at the same quantity and quality at which we appropriated it, we take 100 liters from the Kaveri, we now have the technology to treat it and release it back to the Kaveri at Torekadanhalli, where we took it, at the same quantity and same quality. There's no net loss to the river flow, there's not net loss to the environment. That's the ultimate goal that we should aim for, and we should work towards systems which do that. In the meantime, we have to start to work with communities to make them realize, or to work with them to figure out how water can be equitably distributed. Water is not just a physical good, it's essentially a social good. I'll give you an example again. If there's a lake, what we call a tank in rural India, if by all means of watershed development, catchment management, good rainfall, we bring water to the tank, who benefits from it? Only the rich landlords who own land in the command area of the tank. 85% of the village is landless. What does water mean to them? It means nothing. And actually, it can drive inequity, because then these landlords can get 2 or 3 crops, and therefore they become richer and the poor are left behind in the race. So it can create social inequity too. How do we address the needs of the landless vis-a-vis water? Can they be involved as part of the stake that more water in the village will bring? Which means that, let's say, 1/3 of the water in the tank will be reserved for sheep and goat, which the landless generally own, right? Not cows, which are stall fed, but sheep and goat. Or that the fishing rights in the tank are with the women self help groups so that they benefit from the water that comes in. These are methods by which we need to work around water. And so, therefore, how do we work on social equity and access with the community participation is a key challenge which we will have to drive. That will come from a sensitive understanding of the of this notion of community. There is no community. There are fragmented caste, class, gender divisions in many places. And the community that we create should be more democratic and should be more empowering of people.
You mentioned that interesting part about equitable access to water.
Yes.
I think that's a lot of times lost in the whole conversation around how can we get more water to
Exactly.
the city of Bangalore, for instance. But if it's not equitable, it's really solving no purpose. Because let's face it, right? Like in a city like Bangalore or Delhi, um, the relatively more affluent have their own bubbles. They have gated communities. Most people and residents in those aren't even aware where the water is coming from. It could even be arranged by tanker and so on. Uh, so definitely not equitable. But then you suddenly step out of, let's say, some of these high rises in Mumbai, and you see all the slums around, and there the water crisis is real. Whereas someone here is not even aware of it. So this whole equitable um, management, I hear you in the sense that look, it's not a supply issue; it's really a management issue. Is it solely going to be dependent on the function of the state, or do you think there is the need for a community to kind of start this could be a classic question for any sort of a large issue, but specifically for water, do you think there are other solutions as well while we wait for the state to develop that capacity?
There is no substitute to strengthening the state, right? That's the long term goal. All others are putting band aid on chicken pox. And we have to face it at some point of time. And it's for the intelligentsia and the well read and the privileged, or people like us who are part of the argument around water or the discourse around water, to make for that responsibility accountability. Unfortunately, there is a negative dividend to democracy. The 5-year cycle of elections does not lend itself to the 20-year pricing or 25-year pricing of water. How do we grab the nettle by the thorn is a big challenge. Look what's happening in terms of the subsidies that we generate. Ganesh was mentioning 7 rupees for 1,000 liters is what a domestic connection in Bangalore pays. Those of us who are privileged to have a connection from the BWSSB pay 140 rupees a month for 20,000 liters of water, 7 rupees for 1,000 liters. The poor pay 5 rupees for 20 liters at an RO plant. And they pay sometimes 5 rupees for a pot of water when the tanker comes there. So the poor pay the highest price for water, not only in terms of price itself, but in terms of the time that they allocate for it and the health risks that they have to bear for it. That's the inequity that is there in the system. So what we need to do is to democratize water so that it's discussed at every ward level. How many of us as citizens know what is the actual production cost of water? It costs the BWSSB 95 rupees to get a kiloliter of water to our homes. We get a subsidy of 88 rupees per kiloliter, a subsidy every month of 1,650 rupees a month. It's shocking. And if we don't pay the true price for water, how do we expect it to be collected and treated and not flow in our storm drains and end up in our lakes and our rivers? We protest as citizens that our lakes are polluted. Are we willing to say that we'll pay the true price for the collection and treatment of the water, monitored by AI and ML, thanks to Ganesh, so that he tells us, his dashboard tells us that it's actually being collected, it's actually being treated, and it's there on each one of our mobiles. So the solutions are systemic. In the meantime, we have to work at it as a community resource. We have to work on it as an individual resource, individual responsibility more than resource, and then hold the state accountable in the end.
And like in the past, there have been some very sweeping sort of judgments passed when we had the drought kind of a situation in Chennai, and said, look, everyone needs to start rainwater harvesting. Happened in Bangalore, if you remember, I think about a decade ago, maybe a
Yes.
little more earlier.
2009 we did.
Every independent house, more than I think 2,000 square feet or 1,800 square feet, had to implement rainwater harvesting. Um, and my observation there again was that there was this whole middle layer which kind of emerged, which said we'll kind of help you set this up, but not necessarily charge, but all the piping was kind of in place. But barring that aside, if do you think that a decree like that look, everybody starts rainwater harvesting, can collectively kind of address this situation to a not to 100%, but to a fairly good amount to solve this sort of a crisis?
So there's think of building responsible citizenry. Till we as a nation or as a city do not take upon ourselves the responsibility to become true citizens, all laws will find loopholes to work our way around it. Now again, if I'm getting water at 7 rupees a kiloliter, let us say I harvest 100,000 liters of rainwater, that's 100 kiloliters, it's 700 rupees saved per year. Peanuts. Why should I be doing that? It's the misaligned subsidies for water which is driving behavior. And we have to understand it's an economic argument that people are making. The best people who did rainwater harvesting are industries who pay the true price for water, and they not only do the rainwater harvesting but measure it and make sure that they use it efficiently. Or apartments, gated communities, villas, homes in the periphery who are not getting Kaveri water. They pay 100 rupees a kiloliter, 120 rupees a kiloliter. And once they're willing to pay, there are no tankers then. There the value of water is realized, and they do a genuine job with rainwater harvesting. So it's not only legal, but it's also economic, the arguments. And then there is a communications part of it and a responsible citizenship part of it.
Got it. And that brings me to this point about the, like this the sewage part of it.
Yes.
Because that's like from a domestic consumption perspective, when we were growing up, and at one point when we started getting these flush based toilets, you suddenly notice that they're directly connected to, in Bangalore at least, they were connected to the Kaveri pipeline. So effectively you're flushing down fresh Kaveri water, 50 liters of it every time, kind of using it. And then this whole thing came up about setting up sewage treatment plants. How effective are those today? And have we done a good job of it and putting that water back?
We're now doing a responsible job with it, and we're continuously improving with it. In the city alone, there are 34 sewage treatment plants. We will have 59 sewage treatment plants at the city scale, run by the city itself. In addition, there are 29 sewage treatment plants set up by the BBMP next to lakes to treat a small portion of the wastewater and leave it into the lakes. And there's more than 3,000 of them in gated communities and apartments, because it's mandatory now for any set of 20 flats and above to have its own wastewater treatment plants. Many of them dysfunctional, but at least quite a few of them functional. In some of the sewage treatment plants in Bangalore, you can actually drink from the treated wastewater. That's the quality of treatment. Cubbon Park, Hebbal, V Valley, and other places. This city then pumps out or will pump out 880 million liters of treated wastewater to fill 200 lakes in the surrounding climate change drought affected districts of Kolar and Chikbalapur. Already about 140 lakes in Kolar and about 60 lakes in Chikbalapur are being filled with treated wastewater. This treated wastewater provides water security to farmers to continue farming. In turn, whatever produce the farmers grow comes back to the city as food security for the city. It's the circular economy in place. All wastewater in the city is already booked. All the new STPs have been booked by MLAs and ministers and people for their own constituencies and their lakes there, which is a good sign, because now the city will imagine itself as a water and fertilizer factory. This city gets 1,450 million liters per day from the Kaveri, add 600 million liters as groundwater, 2,050 million liters, of which about 1,800 million liters is sewage, treats that and ships it off to Kolar and Chikbalapur, Anikal, Ramnagaram, as I said it. It ships off more water than it consumes from the Kaveri. It's a net producer of water. It's net positive in Ganesh's terminology. It's a net positive city. And all cities can be net positive. Cities have the economic power, the technological power, and the fiscal muscle, plus the institutions to be able to do it if they so choose to, as a goal, if they do that. And remember, cities' consumption water is non-consumptive in the sense when water comes to my house, 100 liters, I have a bath, it's used water and it's available for reuse again. Whereas if I put it on a sugarcane field, it's evapotranspired. This is non-consumptive, that's consumptive use. With non-consumptive use, treated wastewater or reused water will be the new gold. It's climate proof water. It will be nutrient rich. It's energy rich. You can generate electricity from it. You can tap nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium from it. You can fertilize acres and acres of farmland. That's the modern India that we're going to get in the next 10, 15 years.
That is very optimistic view, and I love to see that this is the direction we're going in.
Already we are wastewater use policies are being formulated at the center, which demands that this be the way we look at it. We now have to tweak our institutions to get people specialized in reuse occupying spaces in these water gel boards and other places. Then it can all happen. If there is a vision, if there's a goal, and then if there's a metrics to measure that goal, it's all achievable. It's not rocket science,
Right.
but we must have the right goals.
Right. So if I'm an average citizen, I'm not part of the policy, I'm not able to influence anybody, but let's say I live in an apartment complex. Is there anything that I do will make a dent in this whole thing? And if so, what should I be doing?
There are 5 things which are already law. Your apartment should have a rainwater harvesting system. Your apartment should have individual meters for every flat. Because again, as Ganesh mentioned it, if you don't measure it, you're not going to manage it. Every flat pays on volumetric basis. You should have that. You should have aerators in your taps, water efficient flushes, showers, everything that's water efficient. You must have an automatic level indicator. If you're pumping water from a sump to an overhead tank, it should automatically shut off without wasting it. You must have a sewage treatment plant. More than 20 set of flats, there should be a sewage treatment plant. And that treated sewage should be reused in your flats. It should be reused for flushing toilets, for washing cars, in the landscape and irrigation. If you're doing all that, your footprint is already reduced by about 40% to 50%,
Wow.
which is phenomenal. And what apartments can do is they can become the most efficient consumers of water in the city. That's what they should all do. And one of the apartments here called TZ in Vartur actually takes its treated wastewater, blends it with groundwater and drinks it. This is the brave new world we'll have to start to occupy. The yuck factor should go. We should have faith in technology. We should have faith in our systems that we're capable of treating it. We should reuse water. Then there is no limit to this economic engine that the city is. And the city is an economic engine which provides livelihoods to thousands. And the quality of life, given the traffic jams and given the solid waste, still a quality of life which is aspirational, right?
Absolutely.
And so we must make our cities livable, of which water and wastewater management is one of the key factors that we should work on.
And the very interesting point that you mentioned is that Bangalore being in some sense water positive,
Yes.
giving back to these districts like Kolar and so on. Is this a Bangalore phenomenon, or is it like other cities in the country who are also
We are, because of our position, Mumbai, Chennai are in
on the coast?
coast,
Yeah.
so you can't ship it off for farm use. We are up there on the highlands, so all the wastewater that goes naturally goes down gravity and was picked up by farmers in the beginning. Now we've made it formal and done it well. So we are one of the first. Pune and Hyderabad are following close by. Many of the small towns, medium towns do have the opportunity to fertilize an agricultural hinterland, which is in crisis, where groundwaters are collapsing, by treated used water. And that will happen more and more. Just one more set of statistics. Cities get a bad name most of the time for water consumption. They're seen as a sort of a dot on the body politic, making a nuisance of themselves in the hinterland, consuming too much water from the rivers, then leaving a pollution stream downstream for the hinterland to manage. Numbers: 284.75 TMC feet is the water allocation to Karnataka state as per the Supreme Court and the Kaveri White Tribunal, right? Of which Bangalore takes 30 TMC feet at the end of the day when the Kaveri fifth phase is done. 11% of Karnataka's allocation of Kaveri waters, just 11%. Mind you, as I told you, that 11% makes a pit stop in Bangalore and moves on to Kolar, Chikballapur for farmers to use. Just an 18-hour pit stop in the city, just 18 hours. It supports 40% of Karnataka's population in the Kaveri basin. It supports the 60% of the state's GDP. That water from the Kaveri. The city is the most efficient user of water and the most productive user of water, the one which has the capabilities of cleaning it up the most and making sure that it's environmentally regenerative, right? Except industries, which need to be focused on a lot more, and then we must get Industrial Pollution Act together. Net result is that cities' wastewater can bring alive the environment, can bring alive livelihoods, and support the economy.
And the reason being that cities can bring in the scale, which is why costs will come down.
Scale, technology, intellectual input, and fiscal muscle.
Right. And like if I'm staying, let's say, in an independent house, I love the idea that apartments are now able to set up their own STPs and so on. What do I do as I'm staying in an independent house, a small sort of 1,200 square feet land. What do I
Really
do?
lucky, because on the 1,200 square feet of land, you get 1.2 lakh liters of rainwater. And you're your own boss. You don't have to listen to the residents association as to what should be done with rainwater harvesting. You can choose to harvest rainwater, collect it in plastic tanks, collect it in an underground sump tank, or make a recharge well and push it into the aquifer, or do a combination of all three. You can pick your grey water, the water from your washing machine or the water that you have a bath with, and with simple treatments and with eco-friendly soaps and detergents, reuse it for your garden and pots and whatever you want to do with it, right? You can have, if you're brave enough, composting toilets, which don't use water at all and which can convert human waste into manure and fertilizer. There is a million things that you can do if you're the emperor of your kingdom, which
Yeah.
may be 1,200 square feet, but it's a
Right.
big chunk of land.
Right.
1,200 square feet can give you enough energy for your requirement through solar power, enough water for your requirement through rainwater harvesting and recycling, enough place for you to grow your own food, right? Enough place to absorb all your waste. If you compost your kitchen waste, and I said if you're brave enough and do grey water recycling and compost toilet, all that waste that you generate can be used up in your land. And finally, it can be a biodiverse area where you foster insect, bird, mammalian biodiversity by making sure that you grow enough green.
Wow. That
Yeah,
that
but
sounds.
I have seen that house. It's his own house.
Yeah,
I was just
do a
getting
good.
to that. I've seen the
Sorry.
photos that he keeps posting
Yeah,
on Twitter.
yeah.
It's an exciting time. I want to get to this particular point,
Yeah.
which my friends also bring with the passion that they have for the technologies they promote. That if we focus on the solutions, there is no limit in the horizon to what we can achieve in India. And India gives you that opportunity because of the water crisis, because of the societal need, and because of the environmental need that we have.
Yeah. You want to add something to that?
No. So, one of the things what I also imagine in future is like while say rainwater could be one source, the idea is that because you are now so efficiently able to reuse a lot of the water, your net freshwater consumption can itself come down by by tens of multiples. So that means now you can replace it with a source like say A2 water. Like now you don't need to rely on the grid, you don't need to rely on rainwater, you don't need to rely on Kaveri water also, because you can efficiently reuse this to a point where your net water consumption itself can come down by say 135 liters per day can become like just 20 liters per day per person.
Right.
I'm a bit more inclusive. I would pick his solution and his
Yeah.
solution and rainwater harvesting and
Yeah.
wastewater recycling and put it all together into a basket. If you try to be exclusive, then you create
Correct.
friction. In this
Yeah.
business, don't make friends. That's okay, but never make enemies, right? So that's the golden rule. So be inclusive. Say, oh, this is one of the basket of solutions, and that's the way it works.
I just want to add to what he said on how wastewater is being utilized. I think in Nagpur thermal power plant,
Yes.
the entire water comes from the sewage treated water in the city of Nagpur. So that way, the thermal power plant, which consumes huge amount of water, is coming from the sewage of
Right.
Nagpur city.
Yeah, and here in Bangalore, the Yelahanka plant, power plant has put in 60 crores as capital for a sewage treatment plant, a 15 MLD one, where they treat that sewage to excellent high standards and they take that sewage for running it. So Nagpur is one place. Here it's happening. BEL as a company has put CSR money, 13.5 crores to set up a wastewater treatment plant, of which 8 MLD goes to the lake to revive the lake, and 2 MLD goes to them for their requirement. And with that 2 MLD, their return on investment is 3.5 years. So there are a basket of fiscal opportunities coming out where industry, community, both simultaneously benefit.
We touched upon this a little bit on this whole, and I still go back to this equitable access personally because I think that's huge and it's in your face. You can see it. What are Vishwanath, I'd love to get your sense on this. Like, what are the systemic barriers that sort of prevent equitable access to clean water?
Two barriers which are crucial. One is the legal barrier, where you don't have ownership to a particular piece of land, a site or patta or a hutment, which then says that the city does not give you a network connection. So this city says, doesn't matter. If you have an electricity bill, a ration card, an Aadhaar card, any proof of identity, any place where I can give you a bill, just an address to a bill, I'll give you that connection. So the legal barrier is the biggest barrier that you have. And then the second is the financial barrier of the connection cost. It's not the cost of water that's the barrier. It's the initial connection cost, which sometimes runs into thousands and in Bangalore lakhs.
And why is that the case?
Because we have a stupid notion that we have to recover 15% to 20% of the capital cost as initial connection cost. And we don't seem to realize that by not getting people connected to the system, A, we are putting their health at risk and we are giving a burden on them. And B, if we are not getting the sewage connected, that sewage is ending up in our rivers and lakes and groundwater and contaminating right and left. Even if we subsidize the sewage connection and take it, the net benefit would be 6% of GDP in terms of sanitation, as the number you rightly put across. So legal and fiscal barriers.
Got it. Got it. And, both of you have been working on some very interesting technology usage, right? So, what are the other sort of innovations that you have seen that you have been wowed by that this could potentially be something? It could be in water, it could be largely in the environment ecosystem. Is there something else that you guys have come along?
So there are amazing work done by many other entrepreneurs. Thanks for asking this question. This Vikas and is doing this work called his company called Boson Water.
Yeah.
So they're actually converting the secondary treated water in STPs to actually almost like tertiary treatment to make it drinkable level. That means all that water that Vishwanath sir was telling, right? One, of course, the sewage treated, the BWS is managed. Other is the sewage treatment at apartments, right? So now he's able to make sure that water can almost fully augment the fresh water requirement. That's amazing work. And Indra Water, Amrit and his co-founder are doing the effluent treatment plant. It's a very interesting technology where in which he's able to treat the effluent. I mean, effluent. See, one is a sewage that is from the human waste, right? The other is effluents come from
Industries.
chemicals, industries, textile, and other things. That can lead to a lot of danger. I mean, I don't know if you have seen the movie Erin Brockovich, right? The hexavalent chromium and other how it affected the society in that, right? So how do you do that effluent treatment? I think Indra Water is doing a great work on that. I think guys like Kritsnam and VGOT are doing some great in made in India water sensors. I think that is very incredible. We are also making like the country resilient in terms of manufacturing these tools, right? And there are various other companies, Haber Water and bunch of fluid analytics, which is doing great work in sewage treated intelligent water management. Yeah, these are some really, and there's a company called Watson Enviro. They make sure that RO water has its own challenges because you remove a lot of minerals that is coming. So this is a using some kind of a nano structure which purifies the water, so ensure that you can even have drinkable water and it has minerals in it. And this his name, the founder is Chandra Shekhar. So these are some names. I think Swapnil will be able to add some more.
Sure, sure. Ganesh actually covered a lot of names which I was about to say. But there's this EcoSTP from Tarun.
Yeah.
They also do like biological treatment of water. So I think shift from chemicals and a lot of motor usage to more biological things. OSAS biorenewables, they treat wastewater and also produce hydrogen, green hydrogen. So that's also one use case. Issues I was telling, like a lot of nutrients, chemical rich. Wastewater has a lot of this, so you can use it for energy. There's some very early stage research also going on microbial fuel cells, which again uses a lot of bacteria and viruses, and where they can convert a lot of these wastewater to energy while also treating it. So I think those again very useful things. Then I think that there's also good amount of work happening in desalination space. While India is again water rich in terms of rainwater, surface water, rivers, groundwater, many parts of the world don't. So a lot of desalination work is happening in Middle East and few other places.
In fact, that was one of the questions I wanted to get to. Like, is desalination? When we heard about desalination, I think 20 odd years ago, we thought, okay, now this is the future. This is the whole ocean is there. We're never going to have a water crisis. But desalination never really became relevant for a country like ours, right? Do you still see that desalination is going to be an important player in our country?
Yeah.
See, I mean, if you consider desalination, it requires 22 times more energy
Right.
compared to freshwater sources, right? I can't compare with rainwater harvesting. And once you do desalination, there is a the salt brain solution that comes in, you actually, if you put it back into the ocean, if it affects the marine life
Yes.
at large, and also fishery business can get affected. But at the end of the day, water is a fundamental right. If you're not able to give, then whether it is desalination or you get it from a different planet, you have to give water to people, right? I mean, at the end of the day, that way, we shouldn't completely look at, I mean, if we have to look at it from a very pragmatic way, we have to find out newer ways to do desalination, right? And India has a peninsular plateau, so that means there is enough this one. So I would rather encourage a lot of scientists to think, can you reduce this energy to a smaller amount?
Yeah.
Can you use renewable ways, different renewable ways than the regular approach to actually make desalination happen? Can you come up with ways to make the output of the desalination plant usable in some way? So that would be the way to look at, then completely discard desalination. But the current way of desalination definitely has various challenges, as I mentioned.
Right. And in some of these conversations, we also heard about the idea that a lot of the tertiary treatment happening and water being finally given as drinkable water, and that's where this whole sewage treatment plants and all are kind of being effective. If I am a citizen who is looking to have clean drinking water, and then you fall into this whole debate about what kind of water filtering mechanisms I need to buy. There's this whole thing about RO and UV, and then you see that RO is 1:3 ratio of letting water go and this thing. What's your take on this whole thing about what should I be installing filters, water filters, if considering that the city is sending me fresh water, and if so, is there merit in this whole debate about RO versus UV? It's linked to the whole total dissolved salts, and is that how it is? How do you guys see that? Considering you guys are much closer to water.
I can tell you how I made personal choices since I have a 4-year-old. So I used to stay in an apartment, and at that time I used to have a RO water, because if I'm getting from groundwater, I don't know how depth the water is coming from, and I was concerned there's a lot of heavy metals, as Swapnil mentioned, that you can get in the water, and I want that water not to affect my. I don't care about myself to extent I care about my child, right? So wanted to ensure that it's a safe drinking. But then I came to know the ill effects of RO water, because it removes all the minerals. So I'm not feeding my child enough minerals. So then we actually changed the place. I mean, I would not recommend everybody to do this, but considering the fact, I shifted to a place where there's a Kaveri water connection, and then started using this filtered water, right? I mean, the where there's a
Candle filter.
candle kind of filter, this thing I mentioned. So that way I'm ensuring my child is also getting the water which is purified, and at the same time there is minerals in it. UV is a good thing. I have no against it, because it actually kills the germs and other things, so it is not going to deteriorate unless I have not figured out any other issues with it. So in general, or if I have to find out a way, make sure that the RO water has some minerals. Is there some approach to that?
Yeah, so that's remineralization that's
Okay.
happening of RO water. But the basic thumb rule is that if the TDS levels, the total dissolved solids level, if it's more than 500, then perhaps you need an RO. But if it's less than 500, you definitely don't need an RO. The TDS meter is something that you can buy on Amazon or any one of those websites for less than 500 rupees. It's good for us to start to get water literate in terms of the water quality parameters that we need to. And it's not rocket science. No? We have small field testing kits which tell us how good the water is or how bad the water is. RO should be the weapon of last choice when you don't have any other control on the water that source, tanker water or deep borewell water higher than TDS. But otherwise, just a candle filter or a UV filter is more than enough. And you get some excellent filters now in India which are gravity based, which don't reject a lot of water.
Right. Okay. So that's interesting. So RO should really be like your last sort of
It's a
option
weapon.
of doing it.
It's not
It's a weapon.
It's a weapon of last choice because
Right.
it has considerable negative externalities. The reject water in flats and apartments ends up in your STP, sewage treatment plant. But if the salinity of the STP is very high, then the bacteria don't function well. And then there's a great difficulty for the STP to run. The treated STP water has high salinity, and so you need to do something more about it before you can apply it on grass or flowers, they'll all die. So there are consequences to the RO rejects.
And even to begin with, you're now withdrawing more water
Yeah.
because like you're only getting 1 liter as purified water, so you're already withdrawing more water.
Correct.
So like that's how we also measure impact in our business, that if you're using groundwater and reverse osmosis as a baseline, then you're almost rejecting 2 to 3 times more water than you need. So basically again you're tapping more groundwater, affecting local communities further.
And for say for our listeners who are interested in practical solutions in terms of conserving water, um, like if I want to set up a very basic rainwater harvesting system, how expensive is it, and how quickly can I set it up?
If you're building a new house, it's a no-brainer. Just make sure that the direction of the slope of the house is one way, where your sump tank is, right? Everybody builds a sump tank in most cities. And then your additional cost is a simple 3,000 rupee filter. That's all. So broadly, it'll cost you 7,000 rupees if you're building a new house. Retrofitting an old house is more expensive, but don't kill yourself in capturing all the rainwater from all the roofs. Just pick one down pipe which brings water down from the roof. Cut it, install a filter, put a 500-liter tank, a plastic tank, if you can find space. Start collecting it. That 500-liter tank will fill up 60 times in a year if you empty it every time. So you're getting 30,000 liters of water, which is good, clean, pure water. All it needs is a candle filter for you to drink from. And once you begin, then you'll figure ways out of becoming more and more efficient and effective. It's the starting trouble that we have with everything in life. Just overcome that starting trouble, and then you're good to go with rainwater harvesting.
Got it.
Can you also talk about if you are digging some of these recharge wells, what's the cost of something like that?
So a recharge well would cost anywhere between 35,000 to 50,000 rupees. But a recharge well can put in 1 million liters of water into the aquifer every year, depending on the catchment size, right? And eventually, in many places, when we do these recharge wells, which are 3 feet by 20 feet or 25 feet wells, they start to give water. The groundwater table comes up. Then you put in a small half HP pump and you start using the water.
Sorry, so I just want to, just for my
What's a
viewers,
recharge well?
what is a recharge well, and how
recharge-
is it different from a, let's say, normal well?
Right. So a normal dug well over millennia, over centuries, has given us water. We take water from a dug well. In a recharge well, we put water back into the earth. So it's flipping it around. So what water do we put into the earth is usually rooftop rainwater, which is filtered to make it clean, and then we put it into the recharge well. Or you can pick water from a storm drain, which has a clean catchment, filter it again, and push it into the recharge well to get into the aquifer.
And how deep is this usually?
So it's usually 20 feet deep.
20 feet.
20 feet deep. 3 feet in diameter and 20 feet deep.
So you basically dig a hole 20 feet down, take a pipe from your terrace, and just put a filter in
and put it
in there, and just keep pushing that in.
Correct. So it doesn't create flooding. If enough houses do it, then there's no flooding on the roads. It improves the aquifer and brings the aquifer level so that groundwater is more available for us.
Got it.
The third most important thing for us in Bangalore context is it provides livelihoods to a traditional well digging community called the Manwadders. They haven't had a job for many years since the advent of the bore well. Their specialization lies in digging wells. Now they can dig recharge wells and make a living so that they can educate their sons and daughters, who then make a choice whether they want to continue well digging or not. So what we aim for is water security through livelihood security.
Can you tell us more about this community and
So this
a little
community is-
background on this?
They're called the Ode in North India. Odisha may come from the community's name. They're an itinerant community which used to migrate a lot, and they're all the way from Kashmir to Tamil Nadu. They've dug all the lakes that we see, the keres that we see in South India. They are the people who dug the canals for the Ganga Canal, the Eastern Yamuna Canal during the British time. They're masters of the art of earthwork. They do it physically. And they know how to dig, how safely to dig without any earth collapsing. They've never had an accident with earthwork that they do. They're great at physical labor. Now they don't have an employment opportunity. So they're learning other skills, but it's difficult for some older people who are in their 40s to pick up new skills. So therefore, to work with the community to ensure livelihood for them is one of our goals.
Got it.
Adding to that, another thing is, we were talking about climate change, right? It led to fewer rain days and intense rainfall activities, right? So what it means is we have flood and drought at the same time. But when you have these kind of percolation wells, you're avoiding flood from happening. If you're able to, identify the right places where you can make this percolation wells, whenever there is a flood, the water can actually sweep in. You're avoiding, flood causes various challenges, including traffic jam in a city like Bangalore. So that way, there's a employment to this community. Then you're avoiding flood from happening, and at the same time, you're filling the aquifer for future, which anyway you're not doing because it goes into runoffs and other places where you're not able to harvest. So it is a great point that Swapnil raised.
Because
And
I was coming to that point of that only 3 to 5% of rainwater gets naturally recharged,
right.
or whatever falls on Bangalore, right? But because of this, then you can increase that multifold.
Yeah. We think we can take it up to 60% of the
Yeah.
total rainfall. We
Yeah.
can recharge the aquifer with it. Just one other idea which Ganesh mentioned when he talked about boson, Vikas and his ideas. So in the town of Devanhalli, where the international airport is located, they are struggling for water because they've dug 110 bore wells up to 1,800 feet deep, which has high salinity. And so, therefore, they're only dependent on the RO water for their drinking and cooking water needs. What we did with several partners was to clean up the local lake called Sihinir Kere. That Sihinir Kere gets filled with treated wastewater from Bangalore, which is diluted in an intermediate lake called Bangalore and then is rediluted in Sihinir Kere. We cleaned up a dug well next to the lake through the help of the Manwadar community. And Vikas set up a state-of-the-art water treatment plant, ultrafiltration, activated carbon, UV sterilization, and chlorination. And now we are supplying 250,000 liters a day to Devanhalli town as domestic water, which used to be Bangalore's wastewater, right? In the second phase of the project, it will take us to 600,000 liters.
Wow.
So we are now completing the circular economy with restoration of local water bodies, restoration of local dug wells, and state-of-the-art technology as domestic water for towns. I think that's the way that we will go in future, where water is not seen as only something to be supplied in pipes, but which is to be enjoyed in the environment, which provides livelihoods to people who work on it, and then to be consumed by us.
That is very heartening to note that even though there were so many wells that were dug up, and this from that state we've been able to reverse it and come to a point where
And
used water is being used.
absolutely, and the yuck factor is removed because if you go to the well, you see turtles and fish swimming in the clear waters. So people don't see it as wastewater; they see it as well water. And then you make sure that scientifically you're treating it to meet BIS 10500 drinking water norms.
Right.
That's the scientific inquiry. And that water costs 1 rupee 50 paisa for 1,000 liters. For 1,000 liters, 1 rupee 50 paisa. What we are learning in the era of climate change is the higher your groundwater table, the lesser the energy you need to pump it. Therefore, lesser the carbon emission and lesser the cost of water. So if we restore our water bodies and restore our shallow aquifer, it's going to give us great mitigation properties because we are reusing wastewater and adaptation properties both simultaneously. So that's the sort of great ideas that will populate India with all youngsters pitching in.
Right. No, that's wonderful to know. Do you think there could be is there an opportunity for, because for me, the way I see it is these kind of initiatives would require the state to kind of come in and do it at scale. Um, if you think there could be policy reforms needed on this, what are the kind of policy reforms you guys think should be there? If someone from the government, the bureaucracy is watching this, what policy reforms do you think could really kind of accelerate our, run towards solving this whole water challenge?
I think first of all, I think groundwater should be regulated, you know, because I think in many places, like even today, I got a call from one industry they are setting up in Gurgaon, Delhi area, and in many parts of the city, government has actually banned use of groundwater, so they can't pump groundwater, and that's why they're looking for alternative solutions. So what that does is two things. One is it motivates them to then look for other alternative solutions. Could be wastewater recharge, data monitoring, air to water, or rainwater harvesting could be one, and it also then makes sure that you have enough groundwater as a backup, which you're not using excessively. So I think one of the policy changes should be definitely on groundwater regulation. Either ban it, regulate it, charge highly upon it. So I think that should be one big thing.
Yeah. I think in order to make economics of water little attractive, there should be some kind of a water credit system. Now we are talking at the backdrop of how carbon credit
Carbon
itself
credit,
is
yeah.
in various challenging times now. But I think sooner the better we have. Of course, water economics is not so straightforward, right? I mean, it's a very local challenge, and I mean, in local area it affects, right? So you can't do water credits like from Chirapunji you take the water credits somewhere else where there is a water drought, because but it is very important that we work out the math of water credit really well and make sure that because everything that we are consuming is a result of nature already exists, and the economics of it has to be worked out. And I think somebody like Vishwanath sir should be involved in such a committee so that he can work out a math of the water accounting and water credits. Like we have Bureau of Energy Efficiency, right? We should also have something like Bureau of Water Efficiency, how water can be actually looked at in that front, and how we make the economics. We just talked about the economics of water, how it is so broken, right? I think the effort should be towards the making the economics of water work to solve the problems of our country.
One of the things we haven't done is we haven't focused a lot on state water policies. Water is a state subject in India, and every state has to have its own state water policy. Many states haven't updated it. So they need to quickly look at updating state water policies. And within that, they need to focus on river basins and making sure that the river basins are alive and well and kicking in all their states, glacier fed or forest fed or spring fed. The second is that all states should come out with urban water and sanitation policies. Urban areas need their own specific institutional architecture and forms of governance, which looks at integrated urban water management. That is long overdue. We have a state urban water policy from 2002, not been updated in Karnataka. Many states don't even have an urban water policy. So we need to create that, which means and includes groundwater too, and treated wastewater and surface water together. Right now, there's too much institutional fragmentation. One institution is responsible for piped water, the other for lakes, the third for groundwater, the fourth for fishes inside the lake, and so on and so forth. We understand now that this fragmentation is not helpful, so we need to start to either integrate these institutions or at least develop a planned framework for these institutions to come together for a common goal or common objective. And that should come from policies.
Got it. And I on a sort of a conclusive note, I want your sort of each of you to kind of quickly kind of say what, according to you, is the future of water in India.
So I think every crisis helps people to evolve, right? As I said, I grew up in the city of Bangalore. It has given me a career and has given me even a direction to work towards solving water crisis. I think by knowing that the problem exists and today it is kind of really sensitized at all levels, I am very confident India will be a water abundant country in next coming years, because there are more innovators coming in. I'm sure there are a lot of good articles come in Better India as well on water. I know you, that's on probably one of your favorite area, right? I'm sure more people are going to innovate, and I think the responsibility for water management is going to only kick in from now on. So I'm very confident we are going to have better India with more water.
More water.
Um, I think like because we naturally have a lot of these issues, whether stemming from policy or mismanagement. India is like a hotbed where these innovations can really thrive, and that gives us the opportunity to redefine a lot of ways how people have been dealing with water. A lot of the infrastructure kind of we borrowed from the West. Like, oh, do the borewell thing, grow only wheat, wheat and these few other sugarcane or few other crops. Again, like a ideology taken from that. So a lot of people are also trying to see, how can you grow more local crops which require actually less water, require, are more ecologically friendly. So I think there's a whole notion where you can move away from what was done and proven, and like start fresh. And that's why I think India is primed to actually enable a lot of these innovations and changes, which you can probably then adopt later by other countries. We always tell Singapore, Israel as few places which have really put well together, put everything in place from policy to technology to pricing. But maybe India can leapfrog that. So that's the future I see. Let's see.
I'm sort of torn between the possibilities that exist and the choices we seem to be wanting to make. We still seem to be making 20th century choices, whereas we should focus on decentralization, local management of water with maximum innovation at a local level to empower communities to be in charge of their water. The best unit is a watershed, which is micro at a gram panchayat level or at a city level, right? That's the best unit of change, accountability, responsibility, and skill set. That's what we should be doing. And we then have solutions, the water abundant India that is there. On the other hand, we can also imagine very destructive projects. I'll tell you an example again in Bangalore. One of the solutions posited is building a dam on the Kaveri, a new dam, which will drown 5,000 hectares of the Kaveri Wildlife Sanctuary. That is also posited as making Bangalore water positive. We have a choice whether we want to do it locally with local waters or we want to do it with a large dam project. Depending on the choice we make, our future will be bright or bleak. And this is the time for choices, and we should not make those wrong choices.
Great.
There's actually a documentary called Damned, which talks about how removing dams is actually helping communities thrive better. Because dams, again, like a thing of the past where they actually served a purpose. A lot of that was also to do with hydrology, hydroelectric development, things like that. But over time, they have proven not to be that, great ecologically. So removing dams is actually better.
I should also add, like, it's real privilege to sit with somebody like a
Yeah.
legend like him, right? I mean,
Absolutely.
the
Absolutely.
master class for both
Yeah.
Swapnil
For
and me
me too.
sitting here learning from him.
And this is
So
in
I
Hindi
think,
called
yeah.
Chane ke jhaad pe chadana.
No, sir. I mean, so I've been also following him, and it's always an inspiration to learn from him. See, I mean, I'm a techie, but for me to work on water and things like that, we follow people who actually work on the ground level, right? So I think this podcast will probably serve that purpose
Yeah.
for a lot of people who are
No,
listening.
that's the aim. That's the aim. That we really get people to be sensitized about what water is all about, right? And incredible work that all of you are kind of doing in this
My
space.
advice to these two youngsters is find a seat at that policy table.
Mm.
It doesn't come cheap, it doesn't come free. You have to strategize yourself to be there. But if you have new ideas, don't limit yourself to a technical idea or a technical solution. The society needs a lot more from those who know the sector from the ground up. And that means that you should be there. I don't know how you're going to knock on the door and get it open and how you're going to find that chair, but at least there'll be chips and coffee served there.
I've been visiting Niti Aayog
Yeah,
regularly.
you know that, right? So therefore, it's important not just to be there to give ideas, but to be there as part of the planning and policy team.
Yeah, absolutely,
So
sir.
be very strategic about that.
Yeah.
Got it. Great. No, thank you so much. Really, on that note, this was super learning for me personally. Getting to know all about the one thing I would want to leave readers with is that if they want to go deeper into understanding challenges of water, solving for all of these solutions that we've spoken, are there any specific resources that you think they could easily go to and read up?
There's
Or
one
listen.
video actually by Netflix, but not on Netflix. It's on YouTube. It's called Water Crisis Explained. That actually tells about the groundwater related beach Swapnil mentioned. That's a very nice video. It's a 19-minute video, I suppose.
Yeah.
Pretty nice video by Netflix.
Okay, we're gonna link that to this. Any other resources? Yeah.
I think one like from a institutional side, Water Resources Institute has a lot of data
Right.
on crisis. Maybe not on solutions, but a lot of the groundwork which they have done, collecting data, where the problems are, where it stands today. Vox has a lot of good videos. They make actually a lot of these explainer videos. I think that could be.
So a bunch of literature by young authors now who are writing on rivers, who are writing on soil, on environment, and plenty of them on the delta in Kolkata, or the weather and climate change, what's happening. And from an administrative or technical point of view, there's a compilation of essays on the Economic and Political Weekly by Dr. Mihir Shah. The book is called Water. It's a fantastic sort of a summary of all the key challenges that we have in agriculture, urban areas, groundwater, and so on and so forth, and what can be done to it. It's a bit dated, but it's a great place to begin with. And then whole young writers are really popping up every month, and there's some great literature to read.
Great. No, thank you so much for sharing this. Thank you once again. Really, this was a very enjoyable conversation, and thank you so much for the work that you all are doing. And really leaves. I started this conversation with a lot of bleakness in my head that we're gonna hit ground zero with no water and stuff. And when you mentioned that, look, we're already sort of water positive in many ways. That's very good to know. And so, thank you so much.
No, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Real pleasure is ours.
Great. Thanks, guys. This was
Thanks,
great.
thanks, Hemant.
Yeah.